We are just about to start. My name is Pamela Grant, and I'm the facilitator and strategic advisor for the Independent Police Oversight Review. We're very happy to be here in Windsor and have had a very productive few days here meeting with different groups, and we're looking forward to this evening's proceedings. I'll just spend a few minutes acknowledging the university, if I may. We've been very fortunate with the co-sponsorship of Women's and Gender Studies, that division, and the Humanities and Social Science division, who came together to allow us to use this space for tonight's meeting and for two meetings we had here yesterday. And I want to publicly acknowledge and thank them for that. We will start in a minute or so. Justice Tulloch will give some opening remarks, and my colleague Daniel Dowdy will take us through the evening's proceedings, and then I'll be back to walk you through the session where you'll have discussion groups and so on. I just wanted to start by saying each table should have a foolscap, a sign-in document. It's very important that you fill out that form and leave us your email address, because each and every one who's participated in these consultations will be sent the link when the report is released to your very own copy and version of the report. So it's important that you fill that out. Without further ado, I'll call on Justice Tulloch to open up the evening.
I want to thank you, Pam, for the introduction. Good evening to everyone. I want to thank you all for coming to speak to us about civilian oversight of policing. As indicated, I am Michael Tulloch. I'm a judge that sits on the Ontario Court of Appeal, and I am here to hear from each and every one of you about your thoughts about civilian oversight of policing. But first, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered in the traditional Indigenous lands of the Walpole Islands First Nations and Brack-Jawanon territory. Now, these lands were the meeting place for several Indigenous nations, and by acknowledging this, we're acknowledging the importance and the significance of the traditions of our Indigenous peoples. Now, by way of background, on April 29th, 2016, I was appointed by the provincial government to lead an independent review of 3 civilian agencies that oversee police conduct in the province. They're the Special Investigations Unit, or the SIU, the Office of the Independent Police Review Director, or the OIPRD, and the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, or what is known as the OCPC. Since my appointment, I have assembled a team of experts, lawyers, and policy advisors to assist me in this task, some of whom are here and some of whom you will meet this evening. I've held a number of consultations with public and private stakeholders throughout the province, including the GTA, Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, Ottawa, and Hamilton. And we've also, and tonight here in Windsor. In the weeks ahead, we will also be holding additional consultations, more in the GTA, but also London. We'll be there tomorrow, Kingston, Kenora, and back to Ottawa. I'm consulting broadly and intend to draw in what I learn to make recommendations to enhance the transparency and accountability of these oversight bodies, while at the same time ensuring that they carry out their work as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Now, by March 31st, 2017, I will submit my final report to the government and to the public at large. Now, as mentioned, I'm going to try and do this. Okay, you know what? Sorry. I'm technologically very challenged. Now, as mentioned, the focus of the review is on 3 civilian police oversight bodies, the SIU, the OIPRD, and the OCPC. The SIU is a civilian law enforcement agency independent of the police that conducts criminal investigations into circumstances involving police and civilians that have resulted in serious injury, death, or allegations of sexual assault. The OIPRD, the second agency, it is mandated to receive, manage, and oversee all public complaints about the conduct, policies, and services of police in Ontario. In addition, the OIPRD also has the power to examine issues of a systemic nature that may arise from complaints about the police and make recommendations addressing them. Now, finally, the OCPC is primarily an adjudicative body, and its mandate, among other things, is to conduct hearings and adjudicate disputes related to police disciplinary decisions, budget disputes between municipal councils and police services boards, and disputes related to the provision of police services. The OCPC can also conduct investigations into the conduct of police services board members as well as police officers. Now, with that background in mind about the review and the civilian police oversight agencies, I want to take this opportunity to hear from each and every one of you this evening. This review is an independent review, as I've indicated. This means that I'm free to critically examine how these oversight bodies operate. Meeting with you, members of the public, is a crucial part of that process. I'm grateful that you've taken the time to meet with me today, and I am grateful and I appreciate the fact that speaking about some of these issues may be difficult for some of you, but it is essential that a review of this kind be as thorough as possible, and that the independent reviewer, myself, consider all relevant information from a variety of perspectives. I can assure you that I will do exactly that. So as long as you participate and offer me your perspective, I can assure you that your views will be reflected. So again, I want to thank you for coming out tonight and to share your thoughts, experiences, and recommendations with us, and I assure that in this process, each and every one of you will be heard. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, I just have a short announcement in French. Si vous voulez écouter en français, une interprète traduit, et elle s'appelle Violaine. Veuillez vous procurer des écouteurs auprès du technicien en arrière. So thank you all for coming. Just as an opening disclaimer, we want to hear your stories this evening because they're very important for the context of our report and the recommendations that we'll be writing, but we want to also be very clear that we're not going to be revisiting past judgments or past cases or opening back issues that have already been determined, but we do want to hear your stories because they are important for the work that we're doing, but we just wanted to be upfront that we won't be revisiting any cases that have already been decided or adjudicated. So the way that this evening is going to work, this is a short introduction here, and there's questions on your table. We're going to ask you to work on those questions within your groups for the next 45 minutes, talk them through, and come up with your recommendations. And after that, we're going to go into the report back session, and we're going to ask for you to share the discussions that you had and any recommendations that you may have. And that's after that, we follow up with a bit of an open mic for anyone who didn't get to share their thoughts during the feedback process. Just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. You'll see the camera at the back there. If you don't want to be on camera, just be certain to keep your back to Dylan. Dylan, if you could just wave. Thank you. Just keep your back to Dylan, or let us know if you want to speak but you don't want to be on camera, and then Dylan will make sure that you're not. We're also on social media. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and YouTube as well. We'll be tweeting tonight at IPO Review under the hashtag BeHeardON, ON for Ontario. I'll also be taking pictures as I tweet, and Peter Rehack. Peter, if you could just stand. Peter's also with the team, so if you see him taking pictures, it's for our website and also for our social media accounts. If you don't want your picture taken again, just let us know. It's not an issue at all, and we won't do that. And that is it, I believe. Thank you again for coming, and turn it over to Pamela.
Thank you, Danielle and Justice Tulloch. So as Danielle has indicated, what we'd like you to do for the next 45 minutes is work within the groups. I think that I see all tables full. There's no one sitting all by themselves, right? Great. And we will circulate during that 45 minutes. I will give you a few time checks. And most importantly, would need you to select someone who will give about a 4-minute encapsulation of your discussion. And what we need to do is to be able to go through each table first and then come back around so that tables or individuals at tables who have not had their particular points made or recommendations heard can speak to that for a shorter period of time, about 1 minute to 2 minutes. And that way, that's our way of ensuring that everyone is heard or able to be listened to. We will pass a mic around and ask that you allow those with the mic, like with a talking stick, to be the only ones that are heard, so that it can both be recorded and that Justice Tulloch and our team can hear what's being said. So I will start the 45 minutes right now, and thank you for your participation. Okay, thanks everyone. I'd just like to remind everyone, I will start with table 1, Curtis. Each table will have initially 4 minutes. If you don't use all of your 4 minutes, that's fine. And please use your time strategically. You don't need to read the questions or repeat what has already been said, but really work on highlighting the substance of the conversation that took place at your table. All right? So, Curtis, would you stand? Thank you.
So, yeah, hi, I'm Curtis. I'm just going to be brief and discuss some suggestions we talked about. So one suggestion was that hearings shouldn't be at the police station just because of the culture, and it's kind of intimidating to see all the police memorabilia on the wall. We also discussed just the number of complaints. So if a police officer gets a certain number of complaints, there should be a decided number, and then the police officer should maybe be sent away for some sort of training or just help in general. And then, we also talked about how maybe when it just gets to a certain number of complaints, that should be made public, just so the general public's informed. And we also talked about police officers as investigators, and that there should be some sort of mediator training with regards to investigations. Yeah, so I'll just pass it to the next table.
Thank you, Curtis. Over to Shadia.
Yeah, my name is El Shaddai. I'm a university student here. Okay, so in our group, for the first portion about police oversight agencies, most of us have heard of these agencies, but we haven't had much interaction with them. And that about our interactions with police, we've had good and bad experiences, but most of them have been bad, whether it be personal experiences or through people that we know. And we think that people are reluctant to go, report to the police officers because it's kind of stressful. It creates a stressful situation to go report police complaints to the police department, right? So we think that there should be neutral bodies that we should be able to go to, whether it be like community organizations, to help ease the stress off, and so that people don't feel so completely hopeless with their complaint. And then for the next section about transparency and accountability, we don't believe that the SIU is transparent enough, or the organizations in general. And so we do want more transparency with that, especially with, their investigations on police officers. We think that they should give the names and explain their protocols, give a timeline of their report and how they came to their conclusion. And we also believe that community leaders should have roles in these different organizations to help, maybe influence maybe what happens with the conclusion and just kind of give their say. The names should be given the names of the police officers should be given regardless of the outcome. First, because we feel that it's the right thing to do, but also we think that it might deter any future incidents when someone sees that someone is being held accountable. And then for former police officers wanting to become investigators in these organizations, similar to what the first group said, we do believe that there should be some type of level of accreditation or something, or a license or something, not just so they can just go into the next process so easily. So some type of medium. And sorry, just give me one moment. Okay, and then for the collection of data, we believe that, all these things listed, race, gender, age, and mental health, should be collected. And then with things like race, we think that ethnic origin is also important because someone is not just Asian, someone's not just black, there's more to them. And that there's a difference, And also religious orientation, I think, should also be added. We decided that as a group. And we also believe there should be more, when it comes to the collection of data, we think that there should be a protocol similar to the Access of Information Act already in place, and that for that, by public request, and also that perhaps even a research body can handle the data, because maybe they can see some trends or report any interesting findings, because it's important to not just have it, but also to use it practically and look at it so we can make some change in the future. And then for any recommendations to help improve what these organizations do, we suggested more civilian oversight, and also we think that police schooling needs a bit more of a change. It can't just be a 6-week program or something. There needs to be things added in learning more about mental health, so a psychology class, maybe learning about the criminal process. And we think that there should also be a continuing professional development program set in place. So it's you're always learning something new, because the communities change, different situations arise, even with things like cyberbullying. That wasn't something set in place before, right? Maybe earlier, but now because everyone has computers and stuff, that's something new. So new situations do come about, and I think that they need to adapt to this change. And I think everyone needs to adapt to this change. So yeah. That's everything.
Thank you, Elsadia. Could you pass the mic over to Salem? She's behind the post.
Oh.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing? My name is Salem. So some of the things that some of the questions that we kind of came up with in regards to the questions that are in front of you, and if anybody else has anything else to add to it, please do. Is these bodies, so the SIU, OIPRD, and OCPC, who are the people that are in them? So are they as what was explained to us? Some of them are either ex-police officers, or they were police officers, or investigators that have a policing background and whatnot. So if these are bodies that we're supposed to be, if we're not comfortable going to the police, why would we feel comfortable going to representatives of police officers? That was one of the questions that was raised. And then within the bodies, is there a representation of those that are being harassed? So whether it's First Nations, Blacks, Africans, Canadians, African Canadians, Latinos, are they represented in there? So can I go in and see somebody within my same skin color? Also, one of the other questions we had was, is there different training going on now? Because one of our, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Pardon? Gloria, what she shared was that when she was younger, a police officer would play with youth, and if you report that your bike was stolen, for example, the next day a police officer will do whatever he can to find your bike and bring it back to you or whatnot. Like, people weren't afraid of police officers or whatnot. So whereas now it's totally different. So what is the training that is going on, or what is it like? Difference in the water or the air that we breathe that has changed that to make us fear them. So why do we fear them? And there has to be a reason for that. So that was another question that was raised. As for the transparency and accountability questions, with number 5, we all agreed that it's a no, that it says, do you think the SIU shares enough with the public about their investigations of police officers? And we put no. But as far as them being, their names being publicized and stuff like that, we do think so, because when we do a crime or whatnot, it's everywhere. If I committed a crime and you Google my name, it's going to say everything that I've done. So why wouldn't they do the same thing with police officers? Why would they hide that information from us if our information is hidden from them? Or sorry, if our information is not hidden from them. And one of the other questions we had was the SIU, OIPRD, or OCPC, depending on the severity of the case, is when it gets taken to that. But what is considered a serious case? What is considered an injury? Sometimes it can be obvious, such as a death. Sometimes it could just be an injury. And then sometimes it could be repeatedly being harassed to the point where you will get a mental illness due to that, which is serious, but it's not obvious. And it might not be a direct, cause from a punch to a bruise. It's not that obvious, or it's not that rapid, but it's still a serious injury in the eyes of anybody else. But those type of cases, what happens to them? So that's, I don't know if I covered everything. Yeah, so those are some of the questions that we covered. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you pass them? Oops.
I just have one more question.
Okay.
One more question that we also came up with is, where are they located? So if I needed to go to any one of these services, where are they located? Do we have? Are there locations? So that was another one of the questions that we had.
Thank you. Yeah. Can you pass the mic to Michelle? She's standing up. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Michelle. So we went over some questions here. Now, a majority of us have heard about the different organizations before, Well, there is only one of us who have had any kind of experience with them. Now, in regards to experiences with police, a lot of it we have heard several stories, and again, one of us has experienced their own story that wasn't the most positive with the police, and I find that in our discussions, something that continued to come up is in regards to problems with racial issues where police were seen instigating. One person shared a story where they had called the police, and once they arrived, they began instigating, and even though they had called the police, they were accusing them of having acted in a way that they could have caused the crime. We talked a lot as well about different kinds of institutions and the double standards that you can see, and how one of the big problems we feel is that a lot of these agencies can be very self-governing. There's this idea of the silent wall of blue that's very apparent in the police services, where the police want to protect the brotherhood of the police and the sisterhood of the police, and we find that it's going to be a lot more helpful if we have more victims, more civilians that are involved in these inquiries and in these reviews and on these different boards, giving more perspective to different officers. We did all agree fairly across the board in regards to gathering information, collecting data in regards to race, gender, and mental illness as well. We find that it would be very useful for looking at statistics and kind of analyzing it. That way we can kind of see any kind of trends that are going on, as stated before, as well as information that is gathered from the analysis of the data can also be presented to different government institutions to possibly put forward some kind of legislation in to help prevent these kind of problems. And I think that gathering that information will be very helpful. And that we really found that one of the large issues in regards to them is that blue wall of silence that we hear a lot about in the news, and I think that kind of covers it all.
Thank you, Michelle. Can you pass the mic to Cassie? She's over here in the fuchsia purpley top here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Cassie, and I was lucky enough to have a very opinionated, wonderfully opinionated group. And we came up with what I would call a few suggestions. We talked about the fact that it's not enough to just have these agencies and these watchdogs. People need to know how to access them, because that's just as important. You know, you need a way to access the system. We've had some people in our group talking about the complicated process to get answers when you do access these systems. I mean, let alone not talking about the fact that a lot of people wouldn't even know where to go, who to contact. I mean, I'm in law school. I wouldn't even be able to tell you some of these bodies exactly what their mandates are and how they differ from each other. Just the system that they have in place that kind of wears you out and wears you down and stops you from accessing the answers that you're looking for, you know, the tedious process, a retainer, credit cards, and this is information that should be public and everyone should have access to, and there shouldn't be these barriers of access. We also talked about race and people's experiences with police officers. One of the people at the table mentioned a friend who said, you know, I'm scared to have daughters, and, you know, she said, I'm scared to have sons because, you know, of the racialization issues in the Black community. Also, you know, stereotypes of aggression that are very prevalent in police culture, and over-policing of areas where there are lots of people in certain communities. And so from that forms this kind of cross-generational memory that lives on, that has to be remedies in these bodies. And they have to strive for more transparency so that they'll be more legitimate to the public. There is also, hang on a second, we also talked about whether these groups should have their names publicized. I believe that was one of the questions. And that was a resounding and unanimous yes. As we said, doctors and lawyers, for example, are called out publicly. You know their name when they're misbehaving. You know exactly what they're accused of doing. Everything is an open book. And as it should be, because they are held to a high moral standard in society. They interact with vulnerable sections of the population, and that's the way it should be. Police should be held, at least we're told that they're held to the same high moral standard, but they are cloaked somehow where other people who are held to the same moral standard are not. So we would like to see that change. Not to mention the paid leave thing. That kind of delegitimizes a lot of things that people feel like, you kind of shouldn't get what amounts to a paid vacation if you just killed somebody, Also, what I think is really important too is that we talked about training of police officers, which I think you guys brought up. And we believe that they should learn critical race theory. They should learn about the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, because, there are some people in society, one size does not fit all. Not everyone is the rational person according to law. Some people have disabilities that make them suspicious. Maybe they have a disability that makes them shake. Maybe their eyes look shifty, and it's completely arbitrary. And they're applying one standard to everyone, even though everyone doesn't abide by the same standard. And so we feel like, for example, if you talk to anyone who's gone to police academy, they know that most of the people they deal with are going to have mental health issues. But there's nothing in their training that reflects that. And we feel like it needs to reflect society as it is and move forward with society and change and adapt to the needs of society. And that is pretty much what we came up with.
Thank you, Cassie. Amazing. Can you pass the mic to Jason, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's good that we address what we came here to do, and also I want to comment that I think that some of the concerns that have been raised are more changes for the Police Services Act, and I don't know that that is what this commission is here to do, and that I don't know that that's the power that the report that His Honor will generate will have. Although, with regard to the 3 police oversight agencies, we had, as a group, we have concerns, obviously, like everybody else. I'm the only person that has identified in our group as having experiences, good and bad, with these agencies and with police. Myself personally, I think that there are significant changes that need to happen within the system to oversee the police agencies in the province of Ontario. We had a brief discussion, and we kind of got off track when we started talking about whether or not we would refer somebody to be to make a complaint. And it came about that some of us think that it's a joke to even make a complaint about police officers, primarily because of the summary dispositions that can happen at the OIPRD level, whereas they can essentially dismiss a complaint before it's even heard or even investigated. And I think that that is the screening process that happens with all complaints that are made. we believe that there are definite management overview issues, and we take issue with the collection of data, such as those outlined in question 9. We didn't really get to address question 10, but it kind of fits in line with number 9 as well. We collectively came up with a series of recommendations that we feel are important to be addressed here, which are training on mental health issues and identifying police officers that may have mental health issues, and whether or not that involves including an assessment by an expert witness or not. It involves increased costs, obviously, in an investigation stage. Some of the recommendations also that primarily come from my personal experience are timeline extensions. So under the Police Services Act, it's typically a 6-month window to make a complaint, whereas the Limitations Act in Ontario gives us a 2-year limitation period to take action against somebody that we wish to sue. Why is it that police officers should be privy to a shortened timeline? And then if that timeline isn't met and charges aren't brought up against the police officer in time, it now lies upon the OPP commissioner or that chief of police in that police agency to offer an extension of time to lay charges under the Police Services Act against one of their own. So I think that needs to be changed. Something needs, as I already addressed, something needs to be done about the summary resolution methods. I would concur with the other table saying that that the minimum number of complaints that an officer receives against them should be made public. Some sort of minimum number, magic number, or perhaps all reports and all findings by the OIPRD with regard to any kind of investigation had about any officer, about misconduct allegations. I personally have made reports to the OIPRD, and they are stamped with, all of them are stamped with a general, privacy clause on it, saying you're not allowed to publish these. You're essentially everything that sets out that that a police officer has done wrong and has allegedly, formed misconduct as part of their duties, and this is now a confidential report, and I don't think that should be the case. I think that there should be some sort of public database or searchable database about findings about an officer, instead of going after an officer's disciplinary records through the courts and getting reports through a court's order. And again, authority for leave to proceed outside the timelines should not be heard or decided by the internal people or the commissioner or the police chief. And I think I addressed everyone's thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Can you pass the mic to Frank? He's behind you. Like at the table right behind. Frank can stand up. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Frank Bauer. I'm with the Windsor Police Association, actually, so my views may be differ from the group on certain things. As to the first portion of the questionnaire, I've had several dealings with police officers. They've all been very good. Yes. A couple of recommendations from the table. One was brought up as far as the definition of injury, have that expanded to include mental issues, not simply physical issues, SIU's the OSER definition that SIU uses for serious injury, bodily harm, death, sexual assault should be expanded to include mental health issues. That's one thing. One thing, and this was more from our perspective, was the length of time it takes SIU to investigate and produce results, their findings. We find that that's for both sides, for police and for the complainant. SIU can complete an investigation, and we know they're sitting on the answer. It's sitting on the director's desk, and it can sit there for a year and not have a response. And there's no time limit right now for him to have to respond. We feel that he should have to respond in a timely fashion for both parties, so both parties have closure. As far as the publishing of officers' names, obviously we have a different view of it, at least part of the table does, in that if there's a finding of guilt or a finding of fault or wrongdoing, that report should be published. If the officer is found innocent or of not have done anything wrong, then from our perspective, and this part of the table, is that their name shouldn't be published if they found we have done nothing wrong. If there's a finding of guilt or fault, absolutely. Aside from that, if I can offer some information also, there seemed to be some confusion in general. If you do have a complaint, no one seems to know where to go to. Our professional standards branch is not in the police station, so people don't have to go into the police station and feel intimidated by police officers or the presence of police officers to bring that issue forward. It's at 250 Windsor Avenue. It's a separate building. There's no uniforms. There's no police paraphernalia. You can go in there, and it's a little more relaxed setting. Anyway, it's still a tense situation, obviously, if you're bringing a complaint forward. But it's not in the police building, so don't feel like you have to come into the station to do something like that.
I've been through this entire province begging for help for 4 years. RCMP.
I'm sorry, we actually can't hear you. Only the person with the mic can be heard. So if we let Frank finish off, and we can go back around because we've actually covered all the tables. So if you can hold your thought and let Frank finish.
That was it. I just thought I'd toss with a little bit of information.
So Justin, can you please?
If people don't know where to go to, that's where we go to. Okay.
Okay. So, or did you want to speak now?
Question? Sure. Hi, I'm Dave Semetic, local for many years, and I'm currently being victimized, and I can't find help anywhere in the province. I've been to the police several dozen times. I've been to the OPP, the RCMP. I wrote to the OIPRD, the RCMP Complaints Commissioner. I did 2 years complaints with the Law Society. I wrote Kathleen Wynne, the Attorney General. I pretty much begged for help. And when all these agencies refuse to help, then where do you go? So I have several lawyers being dishonest with our family's estate, and I can't even find a lawyer in the province to help me. So I was referred to go to Justice of the Peace, where I believe the only way I could protect my family is to go to Justice of the Peace and lay private charges. I didn't have no other options. And after 3 months of waiting for my court date to bring in ample proof of fraud here in Windsor, I was called down to the police station 3 days before my court date where I could bring the evidence in. And the financial crimes investigator threw me in jail. I've been under house arrest for 15 months, a little more. I haven't even seen my disclosure. And a week before my trial, my defense lawyer quit. So now I gotta try to represent myself against several lawyers and a few members of the Law Society with ample proof of fraud. They charged me with uttering death threats. I've never had a criminal record. I've ran a ball team for 30 years, co-ed from the university. My entire family had mental health issues. I was the only one that never had to need psychiatric help, if you can imagine the challenges I've had. I've sat on the executive board of my work. I've worked at children's camps, and I've pretty much never bothered anyone for anybody, for anything. We used to have $1 million in assets. After 10 lawyers, I still can't access my family's accounts, which is as an executor. Everyone's trying to say the estate's done as they systematically funneled me out the back door with 400 grand missing. And when I tried to bring the proof in, I got thrown in jail. But the thing is accountability. According to Revenue Canada, the executor to the estate is responsible for an accurate set of assets. How can I do that if 10 lawyers and our financial crimes officers are obstructing me from my family's accounts? I still cannot finish my family's estate. My wife's a paramedic in the city. She had to go get counseling.
Dave, I'm going to interrupt you because you've actually taken more
I'm
than
sorry, but I'm
4
just
minutes,
asking, when all these
but-
watchdogs agencies we've contacted refuse to investigate, then what?
Well, we can check.
With your lawyers, though, right?
If they're defrauding us,
Right, so I think,
you go to the police.
right, so I think you have to deal with the Law Society, though.
They
And-
dropped every complaint and said it was out of their jurisdiction. So it's into the police's jurisdiction.
Right, so unfortunately, I'm not here to deal with any particular
Right, I'm just-
case, but I
can
hear
ex-
your concerns.
I
and,
can explain policy change that
right.
would bring back public confidence. 'Cause
Okay,
I'm a
well, you
victim.
know what, I hear you, and thank you for your comments, and we're more than happy to receive written submissions
I've
further.
been doing that for 4 years, sir.
Well, to me, though, thanks.
Okay. Are there any other comments before we wrap up? Was it the gentleman in the back?
I was somewhat misinformed, I think, inadvertently. Some of our concerns weren't taken because we thought we'd be given an opportunity to air them ourselves. So one of the things I didn't hear, I agree with a lot of what I heard, is what about where a file has been closed on the basis of the evidence that was available at the time, but then years later, the same officer commits the same crime or even a more serious crime? Can that file now be looked at retroactively, especially when the officers who were involved also were found to be covering up for the officer who was a perpetrator at that time? I think that needs to be looked at as well. And if those provisions are there, they need to be emboldened so that we're aware that they're there. And I think we should be given assistance from outside of the police department in bringing about a complaint such as that, particularly with the Crown's office. I think our local Crowns could probably do a lot for us in terms of guiding us through the system and putting it in a way that the various agencies here would find it more legitimate and unquestionable. So that's something I haven't heard yet.
Okay. Can I-
Excuse me, I just have a question for the panel, I guess. What makes this organization any different from the three that we were speaking of with our questions? Like, how are you different? What can you do that's different to make us feel more comfortable?
Well, one, we're not an organization. As I've indicated earlier, I'm an individual. I'm an independent reviewer. I'm a judge. I'm a sit-in judge. My job is to look at these organizations and to see what the deficiencies are, why they're not responsive to the public's needs, and then make recommendations to the government so that they can change the legislations to rectify the deficiencies so that the organizations are more accountable and transparent.
Thank you. I had that asked a couple of times since yesterday, so thank you for clearing that up.
Okay.
Abiola, or there are two people at the table? Okay.
This is more of a suggestion than a question. We thought it might be a good idea to have these agencies and access points in high traffic areas. I mean, what better way to say we care about your concerns and we're taking them seriously and we want to resolve them in a way that's beneficial than having them in the open air where anyone can access them.
Right.
Okay, are there any?
Yes.
Abiola, actually. Right here, at the same table.
Good evening. We mentioned at our table that some of us have gone to meetings like this, reviews and stuff like that, and the judge mentioned to us that March of 2017, the report will be out and we're going to get copies of the report, which is great. I can't wait. However, how many months after the report is out should we wait before we start to see changes? And if we do not see changes, 6 months, 6 years later, what can we do? That's my question.
Okay, so I don't think I can answer that question. What I can say to you is this, right? I have a mandate to complete the report and to submit it to the government with the recommendations by the 31st of March, 2017. After that, it becomes a political process as to whether or not the government will implement the recommendations that we are suggesting to them. And we're hopeful that this process would not be taken. You know, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, you know, for naught. So that's all I can say about that.
I just had a single recommendation because of all the electronic data that we have in the world today, and we have a lot of cyber security issues, I guess, data management and data manipulation. When you've got a review board that is doing an overview of complaints, how do you validate that the data isn't changed? And I think that's just something with today's society that people can get hacked. I think when you're an overseeing committee and you're making judgment calls on police officers that may have maybe unpopular to certain criminal elements, maybe they could get set up just through an oversight board. So having that hacking and data security, I think, is kind of important in today's world.
Okay. Justice Tulloch, did you want to wrap up now?
Yeah, I'll just hear from this gentleman and then I'll wrap up. No, the gentleman right there, Justin. Okay, two.
To whom, who would be the first person or body that His Honor would be turning over the report to? And then, how long after the deadline will the report take to be made available to us and the public?
Okay, so I expect that the date that it's turned over, so it's the Attorney General that commissioned the report or the review. So I expect to turn it over to the Attorney General on the 31st of March, 2017, and it will be made public that same day. So you will have access to it, I expect, the same day that he has access to it.
And then our members of Parliament would have...
They would also have access to it the exact same day.
Okay.
And this is our last comment.
I just wanted to mention one recommendation, sir.
Yes.
And like I said, I've been through the entire province, and it just seems to get deflected. If you have a panel of 10 or 12 members of council reviewing these investigations, maybe we should put 2, 3, 4 victims on that panel And I promise you, you'll get 100% public confidence back. Have victims screen these, whether it's with the Law Society, the police, the OPP, the RCMP. But then, you know, everyone, I think, will be or feel protected. You're getting opinions from everybody. Because if I were sitting on these panels, I wouldn't have let my complaints go.
Great.
You got to mix a few victims up in there.
I hear it. Thank you.
Justice Tulloch, not a question, just a thank you. As a member of Windsor City Council, I'm very, very pleased that you chose our community as one of your stops. This consultation process, I'm sure, is onerous, and you're bringing a team across the province of Ontario. And from time to time, our community gets forgotten. So on behalf of our community, and notwithstanding how everybody feels about these issues, we're really pleased to have you here. A man of your caliber, we know that this process is in really good hands. And as you can see from our community turnout, this is an interesting and important topic. And I want to also acknowledge that we did have members of Windsor Police Service here. Some might think that this would have been a difficult environment for them to attend, but the fact that they're here is a testament to their character and the fact that they also want to see improvements in the system. So on behalf of our community, to you and your team, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, once again for coming. What I can commit to you is that, you know, we're going to take each and everything that we've heard extremely seriously. I think all of your points, all of your comments have been heard and will be considered by me. And, you know, not everything is going to be in the report, but I will absolutely reflect on them and ensure that whatever recommendations we make, the system, it will ensure that we have a much more transparent and accountable oversight process and system. So again, thank you very much. I think this is a great community. Your presence here, and thank you, Councillor, and your presence here is evidence of the caliber of the community and the concern that you have for civility and civilian oversight for this particular community. Thank you again.
Thank you, Windsor, and thank you for your patience, and thank you for your candid contributions. What I'd like to do just before we wrap up is to ask each and every one of you to ensure that you have completed the full SCAP so that we have your email address and name so that we can send you the link to the report when it's ready. And also remind you to leave your notes, the written notes that you took on the table. We will collect those and also add that to our research and work as we pull the report together. Thank you very much and good night.